finally time to get back to work on the Beetlejuice house. I'm a little tired at looking at just 2 rooms, so today I want to try and add on the front. Well, I guess it's maybe a singular room. I think it's just one long entry room. Anyway, I want to add it on. If you're new to this project and you have no idea what's going on, I will put a playlist in the description down below that talks about the Beetlejuice project from planning to where I'm at now. Everything is built from foam board and wood dowels, so what I need to do is get that foam board and start figuring things out. So let's get started. Okay, here's the question. Earring on with the microphone or earring off? I feel like it's a fashion statement if I just go with one earring. I don't know. Update. I have lost my Beetlejuice binder because I decided to clean my room. It's supposed to be on the floor over there, and now it's not because everything's cleaned up. But I don't know where I put it. Go me! Luckily, I had previously scanned my drawings so that I could share them with you. So I just printed them out so I could continue on, and I'll look for the binder later. This front wall is what I want to start building. However, I went ahead and printed all 3 floors because I have to reference everything when I'm building onto the house. I started by deciding where the magnet wall was going to be. I want the view to the staircase to be clear, so that's why I'm making the magnet wall opposite the staircase. This is also going to contain the fireplace. This is the tower wall, and I'm not quite sure what I'm doing with that yet. And I did find my binder, of course, right after I had printed these pages, but that's okay. Now I have a few copies to scribble notes all over. It was a little bit difficult to get started. I was trying to figure out where I wanted to start building. I ended up deciding on the front wall of the bay window because I knew this was going to be the most complicated build. This is going to be a wall that needs to have a window within it. To begin, I'm using my typical method of the dowels and the foam board put together. I'm cutting my dowels to make sure they are the exact same height as all the other dowels in the project. This is going to help make my ceiling and my second level sit correctly on top of the first level once it's built. I'm now going to be cutting out the length that I need to go between the 2 wood dowels to create my front wall of the bay window. Whenever I'm creating these walls, I just need to make sure to take into account the thickness of the wood dowels because that's going to add a length onto each end of my wall. So basically, I'm just cutting out the wall that's going to go on the inside of the dowels. This front bay window has 3 windows within it, so I want to try and be as accurate as I can, but of course allowing myself to make changes for what fits in the dollhouse. I'm marking an X on the area that I need to cut out to make room for the window. However, I'm not going to cut it out yet because I want to glue everything together. Otherwise, these areas would be a very thin place to put glue, and it would be very difficult to make sure everything sticks together and stays at a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to be using tacky glue and some hot glue. The way I do this is I use mostly tacky glue, which is going to be my glue that's in for the long haul, and I'm using hot glue in just a few places, which is going to be my immediate glue. It's going to hold on to that dowel so I don't have to worry about it taking a long time to take hold, but then my tacky glue will hold over time, and if my hot glue lets go, it's not that big of a deal. Once both dowels are glued onto the wall, I'm going to let them dry completely before I cut out the window area in the center. I'm also going to use some cardstock to reinforce the wall below and above the window area so that when I do remove that big square that's going to be where the window exists, I don't have to worry about my wall falling apart. I know that everything is completely glued together and very sturdy. I end up doing this a lot in this project during this video, and I call them, they're kind of like little patches or little paper mache patches with paper and glue, and they really do reinforce all of these pieces really well. I'm moving on to some computer design for the windows. This house is going to have a lot of windows, and being able to laser cut these is going to be really helpful. Of course, if you don't have access to a cutting machine, you can do this same process with pre-made windows. You just need to know the correct size so you can cut it out of your foam board. I am doing it this way because I have some very specific windows to try and match. I started with a square that was the same size that I know I'm going to cut out of my wall. I made 3 equal rectangles so that I knew I could fit 3 windows. I made an interior frame with the mullions and an exterior frame that's just going to go around the 3 windows. And then I made individual ones for the 2 side windows of the bay window structure. I'm going to be cutting these out of mat board, which is my absolutely favorite laser cutting material, but you can also hand cut your own windows with mat board. It's pretty easy to cut through, and you can layer it up just like I'm going to. Well, it's the beginning of day 2 of working on building, and you might be thinking, what happened to day 1? I'm thinking the same thing. I still only have one wall, and I didn't even cut the hole out. I did get my windows laser cut, but the way I think I can best describe yesterday was, do you remember those old cars where they had a crank and you had to like crank the front of the car to get it started, and sometimes it took a little bit of time? That's how I'm feeling with building onto the Beetlejuice house. It's been long enough that I feel like it's just a slow start. I'm having to try and remember what I was doing the last time I built walls. I'm trying to find tools again. I'm trying to remember techniques. And so we're just going to call yesterday a crank day. So I don't know if you have also ever experienced a crank day where you feel like nothing really gets done, but you're very ready to get going the next day. I have everything laid out. I kept all of my glue and supplies. When I'm trying to have good audio, I'm just going to have one earring. That's the way it's going to be. All of my building supplies are out, my glue, my X-Acto knife. Oh, and I spent way too long looking for my Beetlejuice workbook, which has all of my drawings and plans. Anyway, all of that is now located. I'm back into the building groove, so we're going to ignore yesterday. No, we're not going to ignore yesterday. We're going to count it as a crank day, and the rest of it is just going to be smooth sailing because our building engine is already going. So let's get back to where I was. For the large bay window, I have 2 pieces that have center mullions and 4 pieces that don't have any mullions, and this is going to make up one total window. This is because I'm trying to get a certain thickness. I'm also going to be using some of this scrap plastic that I've saved from previous packaging. This makes great dollhouse glass. Of course, I have to find a piece that works for the width of the window so I don't have any creases or any messed up parts of the plastic. I did luckily find one that works. I'm going to start by cutting these pieces out of the laser cut sheets. I'm just going to be cutting through a few tabs, and then I can start putting the window together. I'm going to be calling the pieces that don't have the cross mullions in them the frame pieces because they frame all 3 windows. I have 2 frame pieces for each mullion piece, and I'm going to be gluing the frames on top of the mullion pieces, trying to line up the edges as best as I can. I'm using tacky glue for this, and so I have to be really careful about weighting down the edges because tacky glue does have moisture in it and it can cause my windows to warp. So I'm going to be using some 1, 2, 3 blocks to weigh them down as they dry. This construction only makes up one side of my window. So what I need to do is make a whole other one of these, which will again consist of 1 mullion piece and 2 frame pieces glued on top. These are going to go on either side of my glass, sandwiching it in the middle. Of course, this is plastic, but I may refer to it as glass because it's dollhouse glass. Before adding the plastic, I'm going to go ahead and prime my windows or paint all my windows white because that's what they need to be in the end. And this is going to be easier to do before it's glued on. This did warp my mat board a little bit, so I had to be very patient on waiting for it to dry. It did straighten back out a little bit, but you will see it does kind of affect how I glue this down. I'm adding tacky glue to the back, making sure I have it lined up correctly on top of my plastic, and I try not to move it around at all because any glue smudges are going to be very difficult for me to get off. Again, I'm going to be weighing it down. This is a lot of dry time and a lot of waiting and weighing when it comes to putting these windows together. This is when I realized my mullions were a little bit warped from all the moisture that was in the paint and the glue that I was using. So I decided to use some of the scrap mat board that I took out of the laser cut pieces. I'm going to lay these on top of the mullions that are right on top of the glass, and this is going to make a surface that's even for my 1, 2, 3 block to weigh them down and make sure that the glue is coming in contact with the plastic. I'm going to do this in each space. Otherwise, I may end up with some mullions that don't glue straight or don't even glue to the plastic at all. Once it's glued down securely, I can take a sharp blade and cut off all the excess, so all I'm left with is one of the window pieces with plastic glued onto the back of it. Now I can flip it over and I can glue the other piece that I had already created to the back, and this will complete my window. It's very important as I do this to make sure that I am still being very careful with the plastic and the very thin pieces of mat board. So I'm going to be supporting my mullions again with a couple little pieces of mat board underneath to make sure when I weigh everything down, it has a solid surface to be weighed against. I'm making sure to line everything up. I don't want to have anything where it looks like I didn't get it correct. It should look like one wood piece that goes through the glass, even though the glass is going through the entire window. While the tacky glue does initially stick to the plastic, I don't want to count on it through the years that it's always going to hold on to that glass. So what I'm going to do is make sure to cover the edges with some paper. This is going to connect the two mat board frame pieces together, completely encapsulating that glass within the window. Therefore, nothing will pop off at any time in the future because the glue just decides it doesn't want to hold on to the plastic anymore. This means my frame now has a frame of paper and glue that goes all the way around it, and there's no escape for any of those pieces. It is now officially one giant window. And now I can do what I've been waiting for this entire time, which is cut a hole in this wall and insert the window. This is really going to be where this project starts to take a little bit of life, I feel like. It's been a long journey just to this point. It was a little bit snug trying to get the window into the spot, so I decided to see if I could sand down the foam board just a little bit. I felt like that was a little bit safer than trying to cut a straight line with an X-Acto blade, because if I messed it up, I wouldn't have as nice of a finish on the wall. Once I was happy with the fit, I added glue on the inside of the opening and I was ready to glue the window in place. This is going to strengthen this wall back up again because I'm filling the hole that I took out of it, except it's with a whole nother piece. It's with the window. So this was pretty exciting to see. And yes, I weighed it down and let it dry at every single time I put glue on something. I made sure to add weights and let it dry because foam board can warp on you in a second. Now that I've gone through the very long and tedious process that was that front wall, I'm going to kind of speed through the other two walls that make up the bay window. I'm going to be cutting these out of foam board and not worrying about the dowels because they're going to be glued up against the dowels that are in the main window. These are at an angle, so I'm going to have to figure that out because I can't quite line them up like I would a 90-degree angle. I'm cutting out the area where I'm going to put in one of these single windows. The single window went together just like the bay window did, except of course it's smaller. And then it just slides into place, which is going to make this wall stronger again. It's just going to be replacing the foam board that I cut out, so now it's one complete wall structure. I'm doing both of these walls on either side of the bay window the very same way, except that they're mirrored so that they look correct. So now I'm going to be gluing all of this in. I didn't want to glue the front wall in until I had the two side walls because that way they can kind of support each other once the glue starts going on. I'm using my 1, 2, 3 blocks to help me support the wall in place until I can get the side walls so that it has something to glue up against. I'm using tacky glue to glue everything together and giving it plenty of time to dry before I touch it again. As I add walls, I'm using masking tape to hold the walls together and make sure that they are in place and stay where I want them to stay. Because of the angle of the side wall, there is a gap that is left between the two pieces, which I will address in the future. Now I'm going to be adding on one more wall that has some pin nails inserted within it. This is part of my magnet wall system that I am using within this dollhouse. And you can find that system in a previous video that I will put a link to in the description box below, but I won't be going over it in any depth in this video to save time. I added another wall with a dowel. Well, I'm trying to. Right now I'm looking for it. I can't find it. And then I realized I had set it on the base, waiting to put it in place. I'm going to be adding this to the other side of the bay window with a dowel because that is a corner that's going to be meeting up with the next wall. Speaking of the next wall, I'm going to be adding this one in with a space for a window because I really don't feel like making another window for quite a while. And this is how it's looking so far. I have quite a few walls added in. It started out really slow, but then things started to gain momentum and I added one more before going to bed. It's the other half of the magnet wall and it contains the pin nails. It's day 3, the last day that I can build before I need to start editing this video. I got quite a bit more done on day 2 than I did on the first day, so I'm pretty excited with my progress with the amount of walls that I have up. I think the bay window is looking really good, except it's not as solid as I would like the wall to be, and so one of my goals today is to reinforce that wall and make sure that it's going to stand the test of time. I also want to focus on creating the magnet wall, which will contain the fireplace. This fireplace is pretty iconic. I'm making it during the time where the fireplace has transformed during the wedding scene. I'm not sure how much of that I'm actually going to create because I'm really just building during this video, but sometimes I get carried away. But I also need to figure out the exterior of the fireplace because that will extend all the way up the 3 stories of the house. So let's get started on that. I hope this format has kind of given you a view into how long things take. I know this video is probably going to end up being like 30 minutes long or so, but things really do take quite a bit of time, especially when you're building from scratch and building something that you've never built before. So I hope if you are building your own house and you feel like you're just not getting anywhere or you're not getting anywhere quickly, that's normal. So it just takes a long time. You'll have to let me know down in the comments if you want to see more building videos like this. I mean, this video was a little bit different than the past videos because I had to build the bay window, which is definitely different from just 90-degree walls. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think. I'm putting my hand behind this wall, so hopefully you can see that you can see through it. That means that these pieces are not very tight to each other. They're not sitting flat against each other. And as I started pushing on the walls, they were just very wobbly and I didn't feel like they were secure enough. So I'm going to start using this new technique of a paper bracket and some glue to make these a little bit tighter to each other. I'm going to be using this on the back of the wall first, and this is going to go up in the corner. I'm cutting the 2 sides of the bracket so that I know I won't be covering up any of the windows. I'm making sure that it fits first, and I'm leaving a little extra, a little taller than the wall so I have something to hold on to, and then I'm just adding plenty of glue, not so much that I'll have a gluey mess, but enough that I know that there will be glue on every part of this piece of paper. It takes a little bit of practice to get it in place. The big part of it is making sure that I get the folded piece right in the corner, and if I can do that, then it goes on pretty straight. And then I just need to press all along the paper, which will adhere it to the wall and spread out all the glue evenly underneath the paper. I am using just plain computer paper at this moment because I want it to stay relatively flat, so when I add the wallpaper on top, you don't see any bumps. The strength in this is not necessarily the paper, although I do feel like it gets pretty strong. It's the glue that I'm adding with the paper, so it becomes this like glue patch that holds everything together. I'm now going to be using some drywall compound in these gaps that are between my walls. Now that I have the paper on the back of the wall, I don't have to worry about this drywall compound kind of oozing through the back of the wall. It has a place to stop it, and I can fill these in. By filling in these spaces, I'm going to have a better chance of this wall staying structurally sound over the course of its lifetime. I'm making sure to get it as smooth as possible, and while that's drying, I decided to go ahead and do this paper technique over the edges of the window. There were a few gaps in the window where you could see through the wall again. You could call this like a dollhouse band-aid or something. It covers up all the gaps and makes sure that the parts are staying together so that no dollhouse blood comes out. I don't know. Well, that analogy fell apart, but the technique does work really well. Now that the drywall compound is dry, I can go ahead and add these pieces over those areas. This is going to connect those two walls together, and the drywall is giving me a place where I can glue this and make it one solid surface. And so now you will never even know that there was a gap between any of these walls. And honestly, now that I've tried this and I've seen how effective it can be, I might go back and add some of these dollhouse band-aids on other parts of the walls, anywhere I think might need just a little extra support. And remember, all this exterior is going to be covered up by siding, so I'm not too worried about how it looks. Now that the bay window is structurally sound, I can move on to the magnet wall, which is going to contain the fireplace. I went ahead and made it because I made it just like the other magnet walls that I've done in my previous video. These have a magnet in the side, and for some reason, it's always just so satisfying to hear that click in place. I also pre-built this little foam board box. It's just a really simple construction, but this is going to be the structure that is the outside of my fireplace, or the chimney that runs up the side of the house. It is important for me to know where this goes in correlation with the base, because I do need to make a hole in the wall from the inside of the house going into the chimney area. So I'm going to grab this wall and go work on it at my work table to try and figure out how this goes together. I drew a pencil outline so I knew for sure without having this connected where it needed to go. I'm not gluing it on yet because I want this to sit flat on my surface while I work on the opening. This is going to be a pretty special fireplace. I grabbed Beetlejuice for scale. I'm looking at a reference of people standing in front of the fireplace so I can try and get this the right size. This part of the movie, the fireplace mantle transforms and a little guy comes out of the fireplace. So this is not just going to be any normal fireplace mantle. There's a few layers to this build. Of course, the most vivid or most recognizable layer is the mantle that I'm sketching out here. But then of course on the inside there is this brick opening, which is very much like the brick opening that's in the attic when they draw the door and go to the netherworld. And then beyond that there is a dark space, or a space that's kind of glowing green. And so there are 3 different areas I need to build. I made a copy of this, one to keep with my records, and then another one that I could cut up and not worry about it if it gets destroyed. The magnet wall that's laying on my work surface is the piece that's actually going to become the brick wall, and then I am going to have the void, or the black space, be the chimney that's beyond it, and then I'm going to build something in front of it to be what holds the mantle. So I'm starting with the brick area because this is going to be my wall that has the hole that's cut into it. And in order to make this look like a realistic brick wall, I'm going to have to draw a brick pattern in the area where there's going to be the opening. This is a little bit annoying, but I know in the end I'm going to be glad I took the time to actually draw the brick pattern so that I could cut out the bricks in a realistic way. Once I had the pattern on there, I went ahead and took my pencil and I just sketched in the pieces I knew I wanted to take out. And then I fully prepared my mind and my hands for several minutes of cutting through a double thick layer of foam board, taking out very detailed bricks. Once that was done, I could hold up the chimney to see how that was looking. Luckily, the little guy is shorter than Beetlejuice, so it's not too bad that you can't see him through the hole very well. And then I decided, oh, I need to make more than just this opening brick. So I decided to remove the paper off the face of the foam board, and I am going to re-sketch in the brick lines to make an entire brick wall behind this mantle. I think that's going to give it the best look. I'm using a semi-sharp pencil and I'm going to redraw this brick grid. It was a little bit easier to do because I could go off of the bricks that I had already cut out. So yes, I ended up drawing this brick wall 2 times. If I had thought of removing the foam board paper to begin with, I would have only had to do it once, but in the end, I'm happy with how it turned out, so it's okay. So now I can go ahead and glue the chimney backing onto this piece because that's the most complicated cut I'm going to have to do to the magnet wall. But then I realized it's going to be easier to paint this chimney area black first before I glue it on, and then I don't have to fight with all those little brick pieces trying to get my paintbrush in there. So I painted that, and then I'm just going to add glue to all the edges, making sure that I line everything up with my pencil lines. This is how I will know it will line up with my base once I add it back to my dollhouse. I'm going to let that dry completely flat, and then I can flip it over, and what I need to do is cover these bricks with Mod Podge. I don't want any of the Mod Podge dripping onto that nice matte black that I have going on in the background, so I added some paper towel inside to protect the surface. Now I'm just going to add Mod Podge all over the bricks. This is going to strengthen the foam and give me a solid surface to paint on when I'm ready. And then after that, I went to bed and let everything dry. Well, it's day 4 of this project and I'm supposed to be editing, but I just have to finish this fireplace. I'm really excited to see if I can build it out to look like it's supposed to look in the movie. I'm probably not going to get to painting it or doing any kind of interior decorating like wallpaper, but I am excited to just see if I can get the look right. And it's one of those things that I just really want to see in the space. So I'm hoping this desire to just see the fireplace in place in the room won't put me behind on my editing, but if it does, I think it'll be worth it. So let's finish up the wall. Oh my goodness, you're so distracting. You're so distracting. Everything was dry the next morning and the paper towel worked really well to protect my black paint. Now I was going to move on to making my mantle, which is the exciting part. I went ahead and made a box of foam board again, and then I cut out the very specific shape that's going to be the inside of the mantelpiece. This is going to sit on top of the magnet wall and reveal the bricks within. I was very glad at this point that I had extended the brick wall and not just done that very small area within the mantle opening. I think it looks a lot better. To start making the mantle, I'm going to trace my pattern onto some chipboard, which is going to be the backing of the mantle. Once I have that traced, I can go ahead and cut apart the individual pieces. There are 3 different pieces I'm going to cut. This middle gem type shape is going to be made out of pink foam, which is a little bit thicker, and the 2 side pieces are going to be cut out of regular foam board, and they are going to be individually placed on the chipboard. The pink foam is essentially insulation board that you can get at DIY stores like Home Depot or Lowe's, and it comes in different thicknesses. I don't quite remember what thickness this is, but it's going to help me carve out this very interesting shape. I'm using my blade to punch through the paper, and it's going to help me translate the shape onto the foam so that I can start carving it. I'm being very careful with my fingers. I know at a few points it looks like the blade is close to my fingers, but this foam is very soft, so I'm moving slowly so that I do not cut my finger at any point. I'm just going to shave off little bits going along the lines that I traced onto the foam with the blade until I like the shape that I get. I realized I didn't have any more blades, which you should be using a sharp blade when you're cutting into foam, otherwise it will tear. So instead of getting a new blade, I decided to sand it to see if I could get it a little bit smoother. I may still work on it later when I go to actually finish the fireplace, but for now I think it's looking okay. Once I was happy with the shape, I realized I needed to make it a little bit thinner, so I carefully cut off the back and was left with the center of the fireplace. And for my first time trying this, I was pretty happy with it. I decided to go ahead and pull off the paper of the foam board before gluing it down, because there is a very distinct pattern that I need to carve into the face of the foam board. I'm going to glue it straight onto the chipboard. This is what's going to make sure that I keep everything in its rightful place and everything is going to match up when I move it onto the fireplace wall. I'm using 1, 2, 3 blocks to try and keep it as flat as possible while it dries. Before adding anything else, I beveled the side of the foam and then I started carving into it to make those patterns I had previously mentioned. To start this, I'm making 3 dots at the bottom of one of the legs of the mantle, and then I'm going to make 3 dots at the top and then connect it with a straight line. I'm pushing into the foam with my pencil so it leaves an indentation as I draw the line. And then there's 3 dots at the top. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm really glad they don't have to match exactly. It made this process a little bit more fun and less nerve-wracking. Then I can glue on the, I guess I'm just going to call it a gem piece, even though it isn't a gem, in the center. I wasn't quite sure how to weigh this down, so I made kind of a little seat belt out of some scrap paper. I made sure to weigh down my 1, 2, 3 blocks on either side, pushing that paper down so it held the piece of foam in place as the glue took hold. As I said before, I'm not going to be finishing this piece during this video, but I am loving how it's looking. I have put these together temporarily with masking tape, a few dots of hot glue, so I can get it apart at a later date when I am able to put the finishes onto it. But here you can see the 3 levels. We have the mantle, the brick wall, and the black void or the chimney that's on the back of the wall. So now let's go put this in place, and this will be my final build for the Beetlejuice video today. Again, it is always so satisfying to have that wall click in place. Here are the final photos of what I was able to get accomplished this week. I'm very happy with the results. I kind of thought I would get a little bit more done, or maybe even get some plans done on the tower. But I did at least leave it at a place where I'm excited to pick up next time, adding the interiors and the details and paint and all those kinds of things. So now I thought it would be really fun to do our Beetlejuice diorama house show and tell in front of the new fireplace. I have 3 of these to show you today. They are so amazing. Thank you so much for sending these in. I will leave a link to the video where I originally talked about this project down below in the description. If you want to participate, there's still time. You can make a tiny house to go in the tiny diorama that's going in the attic of my Beetlejuice dollhouse. I've had several people send in trees as well, so anything that would work for a town diorama. Thank you so much. The participation in this has been amazing. It blows my mind how talented you all are. And excuse my hand in these shots. I couldn't fit my turntable in the dollhouse, so I had to hand turn everything so you could see all the sides. So that's all I have for you today regarding the Beetlejuice house. I hope you enjoyed seeing a few more building techniques when it comes to building a dollhouse from scratch out of foam board. I'm now really excited to build the tower and see how that is going to work, and also kind of figure out this stair situation and how to make this area all function and look like it's supposed to look. So I hope you'll stay tuned. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave me a like and also subscribe so you don't miss future Beetlejuice builds. I hope you have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! You couldn't fit in the house. You're so small. Which means you are especially licky this morning. My goodness. Now you're trying to eat my microphone. You can't have it.